Battlefield 6 was marketed as the next generation first-person shooter we'd all been waiting for. Back in the day, these kinds of shooters released every year or two, setting new standards each time. The new Battlefield is a good game, but it doesn't yet feel like a great Battlefield game. A lot is still missing, though the core experience is clearly there. Players aren't wrong when they say it feels more like Call of Duty in modes like King of the Hill, Domination, Breakthrough, and now Rush. That may sound like a lot, but in Conquest and to an extent Breakthrough, it still holds its own unique identity. The problem is that Battlefield 6 falls short in areas where previous entries excelled. Battlefield 1 delivered unmatched immersion, Battlefield 4 nailed balance and pacing, and Battlefield 3 had some of the best maps in the series. It's frustrating to see each Battlefield take a step forward in some ways, only to take one, or sometimes two, steps back in others. Now there are a few visual bugs, but it's a given, since it's an open beta and not really a concern, apart from one bug that Shroud found.
We shoot here, and look at how it blooms, right? Watch how it blooms, watch how it blooms, watch how it blooms. See how it's going everywhere? It's just blooming everywhere like crazy. It's not shooting straight. See that shit? Look at how it's blooming. Look at how it's blooming everywhere, right? And instantly, I'm assuming I'm going to unmute myself here, and I'm assuming I'm going to say, oh, I'm bugged. I need to slide twice. What the fuck is this bloom, dude?
Go on.
I'm right where we want him.
Spread.
Dude, my gun's bugged. You have to slide twice to fix it. Hold on. One and two.
Don't die now.
Okay, now that I slid twice, now watch my gun. Now watch my gun. Watch, 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 watch. Now watch my gun. I promise you this is a bug. Look at my gun now. See that? See how it's shooting straight? See that? See that? Not a single gun, not a single set of deviation. Nothing. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. So if you guys are wondering why you feel like your fights are inconsistent, it's because that happens to every single gun. And usually it happens when you die and get resurrected or paddled or whatever. But that right there, that happened randomly. That happened randomly. Just out of nowhere.
Battlefield 6 maps are often narrow. If you look at them, you will notice either choke points or streets across the middle of the map that you have to cross and therefore are vulnerable to numerous vehicles and snipers. Also having to cross an open field with surprisingly little cover. A lot of the time this leads to 2 or 3 lanes. Small maps pose issues for other systems of the game as well that I will talk about later. There are very few weapons in the game for any class, unless you are playing the one unlocked game mode where every class can use every weapon. And this feature is locked for Rush game mode for no apparent reason. Battlefield Studios said time and time again they want to try things and have options, but this limits them. In the first beta you had a choice between open and closed weapon classes for Conquest. On the second weekend it was enforced. What data is there to gather about a system if it's enforced? Also, rush maps are so impossible to play that Battlefield Studios quickly issued a nerf of the bomb timer, reducing it by 15 seconds. Which is obviously a good thing since it's a beta and it's meant to be tested. Weapon unlock system is annoying. You need to reach a certain level to unlock new weapons, and when you do, you still need to play the junk that is a no mods weapon until you unlock attachments, and then you can be competitive. Now yes, it's not that big of an issue because of time to die being so short. Still, I noticed quickly that playing with a fully modified weapon compared to an unmodified one was horrible. I was losing many more fights that I would otherwise win. It's not that big of an issue because of time to die being so short. Still, I noticed quickly that playing with a fully modified weapon compared to an unmodified one was horrible. I was losing many more fights with the newly unlocked weapon that I would otherwise win. It's not just because I'm playing a new weapon, in fact most of them feel pretty samey. Bullets. The best ones on NVO228E require you one less shot if you go 2 for the head and 1 body, as in the standard ones require 3 for the head and 1 for body. Other than that, if you go just for the head, it requires still the same amount of bullets in short range. On top of that, since mods also improve weapon handling, the game leaves you stuck with a weapon that feels significantly worse by comparison. For players that couldn't play a lot during the beta, they were left with the starter weapons, since you need to grind a couple of hours to unlock new weapons. meaning the average player will certainly not reach the last unlockable gun in their class, which would require to reach the max level available during the beta. And even if they did, they would also have to level it up to be relevant. Now, the gunsmith itself is not made with the best available modifications, as in there are easy to identify best mods for a weapon, or maybe one variation if you're feeling spicy. This means that most people will run mods that are the last in the unlock tree, making the more skilled Battlefield 6 players not only better in game with map understanding and its systems, but also having straight up recoil and damage advantage. An unmodified and a fully modified weapon, as mentioned before, changes significantly. Why not make modifications alter bonuses instead? For example, a vertical grip could reduce vertical recoil, while an angled one could reduce horizontal recoil. There doesn't seem to be any fun builds or variations that are meaningful. This game is supposed to be an easy entry for casual players, and in a lot of ways it is. However, players love running around their own created goofy builds, or just straight up using the recommended builds that are in such games, which are automatically good. Matchmaking feels inconsistent. Sometimes you have to wait a couple of minutes after a game, while other times you get matched instantly. With over 500,000 concurrent players, it's hard to believe the issue is lack of players. It seems more likely that there's a problem with the matchmaking system in itself. There are very few maps to begin with, which is fine, it's a beta anyway. However, there are only 3 maps in the first beta weekend and 4 in the second, and 3 of them, Iberian Offensive, Empire State, and Siege of Cairo, don't have any aircraft, which is not in itself a bad thing, but it's a symptom of bigger problems. The maps are simply too small for aircraft, which is why they're generally not allowed. Even Liberation Peak, the one map that permits them, still feels overly restrictive. Aircraft doesn't really fit on a map where you can fly past the main combat zone in just a few seconds. It comes across as goofy. If you enjoy piloting, good luck finding meaningful dogfights, since only a single jet can be in the air at once. This often leads to one team's jet crashing immediately, leaving the other side with nothing to do but strafe ground targets in a tiny space. The result cheapens or outright removes the dogfighting experience. If you allow jets and helicopters in Liberation Peak, make more of them available at the same time to have real air combat. Also, you had to have good luck to get into the only map that allows it, since there was no server browser or map preference selection in the first beta weekend, and you had to just roll the dice every time when you queued up and hope to be put in that map. Thankfully, in the second weekend they added the option of custom playlist, but still, there is no server browser. However, they have stated that the server browser is not being tested at the second open beta weekend, which implies it will be there at launch or at some point. Funnily enough, the Battlefield Studios post about new features mentions that they want to test things out and see what players enjoy. If that's the goal, why not showcase the largest maps available? Unless, of course, there won't be any bigger than what we currently have. That would give a clearer picture of what players actually prefer. To be fair, they did say larger maps are coming, but so far the tests have only been on small to medium-sized maps, at least by the standards of previous Battlefield titles. Adding Team Deathmatch and Rush hardly changes anything, we have already seen everything during the first beta weekend. It's the same thing with small maps and no new weapons. Liberation Peak suffers from the plague that are snipers. There's plenty of them with their huge glints all over the mountainside. The glint being so big is really off. Like, they did it right in Battlefield 1, why change what worked perfectly? They stated again that it will be reduced, so that's good. However, Battlefield Studios also stated themselves that they wanted to reduce the amount of sniping, and therefore moved the respawn beacon from recon to assault, to limit the endless snipers permanently respawning and holding the same positions for most of the match. Which is a good change, but then they allow to have 7x scopes on assault classes, with bullets that deal increased headshot damage, seems counterintuitive. The game currently has no match history and no profile page to see your stats. That's a bummer. I hope it will be in the full release, but it doesn't make much sense to leave that thing out of beta. It's looking a bit sus that there is no way to check your match history or profile in a multiplayer game in 2025. I have seen a lot of discussions about time to kill and time to die, and frankly I don't really see an issue here. If anything, time to die is a symptom of weapon modification power creep, and certain weapons being too powerful like the shotgun. Now the shotgun in itself maybe would be fine, but the fact that you don't even sacrifice your mid-long range weapon for it is absurd. You can run both a shotgun and a mid-range weapon on assault. Other classes don't get that benefit. And other classes that get other benefits instead of the second primary weapon choice is laughable. An extra grenade or a mine is whatever compared to that. It also feels restrictive that you can't swap a secondary firearm from another player to carry 2 primaries. Sometimes it's fun to run around with other players' weapons and test them out, especially when you run out of ammo, which happens often in the smaller 16 vs 16 modes, where you spawn with so little. Instead, when you try to swap, the game forces you to change your entire class and that of the dead player. That's a strange limitation. If I've killed someone and want their weapon, why restrict it? The game already has modes where you can freely choose any weapon for your class, so at least make it possible for Assault, since he's the only one who can carry two primaries. Battlefield isn't a competitive esports title where everything has to be perfectly balanced. We all know that. Just like in past games, there will always be someone dominating the leaderboard with flying jets or helicopters non-stop. The game already feels unbalanced at times, so why not lean into the fun and allow Assault players to pick up extra weapons as secondaries instead of forcing a full class swap? If I'm playing Assault, I don't want to suddenly become support, so I'd never pick up this kit anyway. One of the best parts of Battlefield 1 for me was picking up my squad in a vehicle, heading to a key location and holding it down so the rest of the team could push forward and capture objectives. That kind of coordinated squad-based play was central to the experience. Unfortunately, reducing squad size from 5 in Battlefield 1 to 4 now really hurts that dynamic. I don't understand why they felt the formula from Battlefield 1 needed changing. It just feels like a watered down version of what worked so well before, especially if you enjoy that style of teamwork. There's been some feedback about player running speed being too high and vehicles feeling suboptimal because it takes longer to reach objectives, particularly in Conquest. Personally, I think that criticism is overblown. Sure, it may not always be the most efficient way to capture a point, but that's the whole purpose of land vehicles, to move your full squad quickly and strategically toward important objectives, instead of just spawning in and running to the closest flag. To their credit, Battlefield Studios has acknowledged many of these issues, and if they deliver on what they've promised, the game should see meaningful improvements by launch. The development of Battlefield 6 reminds me a lot of Battlefield 4, which had a terrible launch, but was eventually fixed and became a fan favorite. I'm not saying Battlefield 6 will launch poorly, in fact, judging by the open beta numbers and the hunger for a fresh FPS, I think this could be one of the strongest launches yet. Where it really mirrors Battlefield 4, though, is in its post-launch trajectory. With steady updates to core systems, the game will likely get progressively better over time. That said, it's a little disheartening for long-time Battlefield fans to see some of the series' strengths watered down or outright removed. It's still a great game, it just needs to feel a little bit more Battlefield and a little less Call of Duty.